Hey there, this is Jason. This is my roleplay introduction. Susan, cisgender white female, married with children, 38 years old. She is coming to therapy to discuss problems that she's having with her relationships with her parents. She feels stuck and distant and unable to be honest with them as they're aging and also geographically distant. This is our second session, so we've already gone over the informed consent and any of the treatment details, payment, etc., etc. Hey,
Hi.
how's your day going?
Uh, Day's going okay. Feel a little tired, a little anxious today.
Is that job related? Is that specific to today, or?
I'm not sure if it's nothing unusual is happening at work. I do notice my energy's been a little low the last few weeks.
It's a good segue into talking about what we discussed in our first session. I realized that you're coming to therapy with some concerns about your relationship with your parents
That's right.
who are aging and who you feel kind of distant from at this point. And I believe you said that you feel stuck was the word that you used.
Yeah.
And that you're unable to communicate with them. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Because,
That's exactly right.
okay.
Yeah, particularly
The mucky relationship is the problem, but Susan is separate from the problem. And one of your career is important to you. Anything that comes to mind that's important to you, I would like to hear about.
Well, I mean, family's really important to me. I like spending time with my daughter, my husband, in my downtime. I work full time, so my downtime is important to me. I enjoy music. I enjoy spending time at the beach. I love being outside, outdoors in nature. I like to garden. I enjoy, kind of outdoor sports, but I'm not really, an athlete or anything, but I enjoy pretty much anything that's outside and engaging with other people. I really like being in nature.
And are there any sports in particular that you like doing? Any activity?
Yeah. I enjoy yoga right now. I mean, it's something that I've gotten into recently. And I like working out. I enjoy going to the gym and doing classes at the gym. My daughter and I were just talking about skiing this winter and getting her into that. I haven't done that in a few years, but I look forward to that. Those are a couple of things that come to mind.
It sounds like you live a full life outside of your responsibilities. It sounds that you enjoy a fair amount of stuff. What we're looking at is how has the problem affected you personally, relationally, right? So personally, some people might start smoking when something like this happens.
Yeah.
Drinking, who knows? But relationally, how has it affected your relationships, particularly even the ones with your parents in mind, and then also your broader life sort of position, your vantage on has it affected your hopes and dreams, your future plans, anything in that regard? Has it altered your career course?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you can start on any one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spend a lot of time sort of preparing and planning before I.
So I thought what would be interesting, I think that I'm curious to hear about when you notice moments in your day where the problem is less, places in your life where you realize that the problem is not a problem, or that it's at least less of a problem.
That's an interesting question. I know that when I feel that I'm making enough time for myself, um, I'm getting adequate rest. I, how to have a good kind of balanced week in terms of rest and exercise and sort of those things that are important to me. Eating well, um, making time for yoga and exercise that I feel less kind of hampered by the state of my relationship with my parents. I think when weeks at work are more stressful and there's a lot of moving parts in the day and lots of organization around those things, that would involve getting up on the earlier side and taking a kind of leisurely 2 hours to just have coffee and enjoy sitting outside and doing a little gardening and watering and listening to the sound of the birds. And I feel good when I'm doing those things. And I don't know, the weight of my relationships here don't seem as burdensome. So they're simple things in a way, but having space for them really seems to help. Do you want me to continue?
I think that what I'm noticing is that, or it sounds like there are possibilities where, and it sounds like there's a balance to the problem separate from Susan, the person, already to some extent. And so it might be a matter of us working already with things that you already have foundations and you've already made beginnings with. So I'm kind of excited about those things. Maybe we can go more in depth into those relationships that are positive and things that the activities that you do notice, and perhaps this week maybe just being mindful of those moments where you don't have the problem, where the problem is not the problem, where you're just in that moment.
Okay. That's what we're going to do in the coming week.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just wouldn't mind taking notice about those moments where the problem's not the problem, and we can sort of start back there next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hi, yeah. The reason I've chosen narrative therapy to concentrate on is that I think that narrative therapy has the potential to sort of exist at a very common human place, because narrative and meaning making is so inherent in the way that humans in general sort of relate themselves in their world. And I think by nature and by this fact that narrative therapy is in its essence multicultural, I think that it ties into notions of being able to combine narrative therapy with uh, creative arts therapy, and that would sort of be able to occur in an endless amount of ways, in an endless amount of medium, altered books, film and video, sculpture, performance, movement-based pieces as well. Um, and I think that goes into maybe why there's a major strength to narrative therapy over some of the other therapies, at least as far as I can see it, and as far as I think would like to practice therapy in general, art therapy as well. So in the video we saw Susan. Some of the three techniques were employed, narrative therapy techniques. The first was meet the person apart from the problem, where we talked with Susan about her hobbies and interests and things outside of the relationship problem with her parents. And then the next focus was on the problem saturated narrative, in which we discussed details about the problem with her parents to get a sense of how that affects her in her life, and in general. And then we discussed finally unique moments and sparkling events, in the way that we talked about times, moments in her week or day uh, where the problem is nearly non-existent or is completely non-existent. And I think that narrative therapy differs from Gestalt, say, or a humanistic approach, in the way that it looks directly at the problem in the person, and then also the narrative that is sort of it fashions those two things together. The person and the problem sort of fuse as one entity, and narrative looks at sort of dissecting that a little bit, whereas maybe those things are woven together a little bit more continuously, for humanistic or Gestalt type therapy, even systems perhaps. Um, I think strengths of this technique, as I said before, is that it has the ability to adapt to clients of all types of backgrounds, which is really important to me, as I sort of investigate my own privilege and try to come at therapy with a little less bias and a little more openness to even the way people interpret themselves, or come to therapy in general, if they haven't had any experience with it, bad, good, or indifferent. It's kind of my hope that they would be able to come and find a place that would be as non-judgmental as I can possibly make it. I think too that it's adaptable, as I said before. That narrative therapy could combine well with other psychotherapeutic techniques, and systems theory is one of those techniques I think it could work well in just looking at a larger sense of how we fashion these narratives about ourselves, local narratives or dominant narratives. Uh, I think most likely we'll continue to create narratives as people, as a way of understanding ourselves and our lives. And I think that narrative therapy in this sense will have a great deal of longevity as a strength. Limitations, and I hate to end on the negative here, but I guess I'm gonna. Limitations would be that The technique could be diluted a little too much, maybe with other psychotherapeutic techniques, and therefore sort of take away from the potency of the original theory, perhaps not even resembling the original theory in some sense. And I think that would be sort of a shame. Also, it might be a little more structured than some people are used to or consider when they come to therapy. Um, Especially if maybe they have psychodynamic or even Gestalt therapy backgrounds where you just sort of weave, your story without much without much discretion into the types of specific questions that narrative looks at. I think also that it might not be guided or specific enough for some people, such as CBT, in the way that it looks at behavior and adjusting our behavior in really specific ways. And so I think that that could also perhaps be a bit of a blind spot for narrative therapy. But I feel like there's a ton of room for it to grow as a profession in general, and certainly in my own practice. So.